Welcome back. On tonight's episode, a trip down memory lane. Indeed, WandaVision's latest episode gives us the MCU style we love while utilizing the ultimate trope of all sitcom tropes, clip shows. All of this and more on tonight's episode of Talkin TV's WandaVision Rewatch. All right, what is going on, people? Happy to be back. Happy to have a familiar face back that we have not had a chance to have on the podcast yet. Since we started our third season, Joe of Guy at the Movies back in the co-pilot chair. How have you been, my dude?
I've been great. Very happy to be here. Very happy to have an audience to talk about all of my theories with this show because I have about 35 that just continue to conflict.
Okay.
So I'm ready to go.
All right.
Hell yeah.
All right.
We'll get into all that type of stuff, man.
And of course, my beautiful co-host, Chris Evenko, the TV nerd. I'm giving you that compliment tonight, dude.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not going to lie.
Man.
I'm a little bit sauced right now, but that's fine. That's not going to stop my ability.
You've
to
had
be
2
a
sips of a
confident
beer.
Podcast host. No, a gin and tonic.
Well, Dom, I
I
think
told you this. We discussed this before the show began.
I thought you opened it then.
Yeah.
Hey, don't question the process, and I think that's kind of what I have to stop doing when it comes to WandaVision. But
Yeah, right?
we'll get into that. We have a great show for you guys this evening. A bunch of people already popping in the chat. We got Luke reviews, of course. Jay Manley. Hello to yourself. I'm stoked, guys. It's been a while since we had Guy at the Movies on the channel. We have the penultimate episode of this limited series that is WandaVision. So much to talk about. But before we do that, because we're very honored to be a part of this event again, the second Guy at the Movies Film Festival.
Yes,
Joe, right
indeed.
at the top, man. Let the people know what you have planned for us at the end of next month.
Yeah, so we have the second annual Guy at the Movies Virtual Film Festival. This was something that was born out of the fact that we were all sitting at home. We were, last August, we didn't know where this thing was going with the pandemic. And look, hey, surprise, here we are again, right? Heading into March, and we're still dealing with a lot of it. But it is a great opportunity to be exposed to different creators on YouTube, Instagram, any of the social media networks, and also chat with some filmmakers. So the big focus of this year is once again just bringing people together. We're lucky to have the creator and the writer of Willy's Wonderland, who will be joining us to chat about sort of what got him into his career, but also what led to Willy's Wonderland becoming a thing. I am one of those people, and we haven't talked about this specifically, Dom and Chris, but I do think that this is going to be a cult classic down the road. Fully expect that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just
I'm kind of in that boat, Chris. I'm not going to lie. I'm in that boat too.
I'll get to this movie soon then.
It's a fun ass movie. But thankfully you guys are going to be hosting the after party, so to speak, which is a watch party online, or a watch along, I should say, of Willy's Wonderland. So in addition to that, we'll have some live podcast recordings, some educational sessions, trivia, and some other films that we'll be featuring either in a chat-based watch party or a visual watch along. So there's a lot of stuff coming up. Just stay tuned. Follow Guy's Film Festival on Instagram, and you'll get all of that information.
Hell yeah,
Awesome.
man. That's I'm really looking forward to it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, Dom, I don't know how much of this you know. Lately, he's just been exposing me to the wide and vast world that is Nicolas Cage. I mean, we're already very Nicolas Cage minded over here on the show, so it's just so
Joe,
awesome that you guys.
I'm calling it right
attach
now.
to
When
that.
we do, so we just posted our Silence of the Lambs first time watch for Chris, and I made Chris a promise is that our next first time watch for him is going to be Face Off.
Oh my gosh.
Going
Can't
to be
wait.
incredible.
Not to go off on a tangent, but 2 weeks ago we went off on a tangent about Face Off because the news of them actually doing a sequel to it now.
Yes.
Everyone thought it was going to be a reboot, but
Yes.
it's going to be a sequel, and who knows how that's going to work. But that's one of those classic movies that is just 90s through and through.
I can't wait, man. I've been loving these first time watches, and everything I hear about that film is just bonkers beyond belief.
I told you, Joe, can you before we actually get to WandaVision and the subject of tonight's episode, can you at the very least agree with me that any movie that is able to sneak the actual title into the movie as a line of dialogue, it is automatically a perfect movie? Like the way that Nicolas Cage says,
I cannot agree with that because sometimes where it happens and you're like, oh God.
It's incredible. It doesn't matter. It's automatically incredible.
He's solid. He's
another
a great
example.
Actor.
Silence of the Lambs, perfect movie. Anyways, people. So tonight's episode of WandaVision, if we can get into the recap section, just to give you guys a quick recap of what happened, because I would say, in all modesty, that there was both a lot and very little that happened. It was one of those episodes that was very internal, but quite frankly, an episode that was very, very much needed after the past 7. So the episode entitled Previously On, directed once again by Matt Shakman and written by Laura Donney. Episode opens with a Salem witch trial of 1693, which of course was predicted and shown in previous Marvel set photos, and now here it is confirmed. Agatha Harkness being held trial by a coven of witches led by Agatha's mother for practicing dark magic, and as they attempt to kill her, she drains their life from them. And in the present day, Agatha demands to know how Wanda is controlling Westview, threatening her with the lives of her children. She forces Wanda to go through some magic door in her basement dungeon that Wanda found, ignoring the key crucial book on the side that's going to tie into Doctor Strange somehow. They go through different key moments in her life, in which, of course, will bring into context all of the guesses that people have been having previously. Yes, Wanda did watch these types of sitcoms as a child. Yes, they were her only connection to her family. Yes, they are kind of her comfort zone with all of the trauma that she has to deal with. So all of this coming into effect, I feel like really starts to amplify the elements of the episode, especially once it's revealed that Wanda did indeed have magical abilities since birth, a slight retcon since Age of Ultron, and they were amplified upon coming into contact with the Mind Stone. So it turns out that we are finally starting to learn some things about Wanda that we didn't realize before. Later, it is seen Wanda visit Sword in order to try and recover Vision's body, in which she runs into Chris's favorite character, Director Hayward, who shows her the mutilated, cut-up corpse and refuses to let her bury him, stating that he is too valuable a property to let go. And unable to feel any life left in the android, she leaves and drives to a lot in Westview that Vision had bought for her, intending to live together there. And in a fit of grief, her magic extends and she creates a house, manifests a completely new version of Vision, and transforms the town, effectively extending the hex across it. This leads Agatha to come to the conclusion that Wanda possesses a legendary form of magic and deems Wanda the Scarlet Witch. And of course, because finally Marvel read a Facebook post and realized, oh wait, our credits are too fucking long. We should actually give the people something to enjoy. They put in another post-credit scene after the post-credit scene last week that everyone missed, in which Monica Rambeau was searching outside of Agatha Harkness' house and was cornered by supposedly the fake Pietro, still played by Evan Peters. I'm glad they're keeping him in. But with this episode, we have Director Hayward. Ugh. I can't wait to see what happens to this guy. And I mean that in every sense. It is revealed that his weapon that's going to go inside and get Wanda is a newly recreated version of the actual Vision corpse, which has now been completely whitewashed. I'm going to say it. I don't care. He has been completely turned white and his soul has been drained out of him, people. It is all leading up to an epic climax, definitely next week, which is going to be an equal banger on this show. Let me tell you guys right now, if you guys thought that our last couple of panels have been insane for finales for shows, you guys haven't seen shit yet. So with all that,
I'm being invited back. That's so nice. Thank you so much.
We would love for you to come back. Dude, that's kind of something we've been doing.
You didn't know that being the guest in the episode automatically guarantees you a spot?
No, you never told me that.
Oh, well, yeah, because we put people on the spot live and asked them, "Hey, will you like to join us?" So, Joe, will you like to join us next week for the finale?
No, I'm busy that day. Yeah, I'll be there.
Awesome, hell yeah! And guys, I think it's at this point safe to say that our finale might be better than WandaVision's itself.
I agree. I very much agree with that sentiment.
With that being said, before we dive in and get our thoughts and all that, Joe, catch us up to speed, man. What have you been thinking of this show so far?
You know what? I've actually been pleasantly surprised. It's funny. This morning I woke up at like 6:30 and I don't know why, but I randomly woke up and I'm like, I'm going to watch WandaVision because I think I'm just so excited to see where this thing is going. It's very different than anything we've seen with the MCU. It's borderline, random comedy, cheesiness. Some of it's to be quite honest, dumb. But then they hit you with stuff, and you know that they're laying the groundwork based on all of the different source material that they're pulling from, whether it's House of M or other comics. And the other thing that Marvel is having so much fun with is they're putting Easter eggs in there that don't become Easter eggs. They're there to throw you off. And they're just having a blast with this. And I think it's really exciting seeing where they could go with phase 4. And recognizing that the next step after this is, of course, we're getting Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but connected to this, we're getting Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And I just think that the sky's the limit in terms of where they're going. So I've very much been enjoying it. I do wish the episodes were a little longer. Some of them are very short. I feel like with The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, we got some that were, 45 minutes, some that were 29 or whatever. These always seem to fall, I don't know, like 30 to 35 or whatnot. And then there's 18 minutes of credits. But it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. It's nice to see these two characters, and in particular, Lizzie Olsen's Wanda Maximoff, get the attention that she hasn't had before. And I think she's doing a great job with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my whole thing with it is that even though my individual takeaways after each episode might not be the strongest, I'm just excited to have something to look forward to again each week. I'm excited to be excited about something again, if that makes any sense at all. And I'm not going to lie, the anticipation, even though it's a different kind of anticipation than I've had really from a miniseries like this, I'm still interested and I'm still really invested in where this is going and just how this is affecting the characters internally. And while I still find it to be a little still surface level-y, it's still the deepest that Marvel has ever gone with a character. And this episode in particular continues to demonstrate that. Chris, so this was, I think, the first episode that you and I had no communication about beforehand. Like we didn't speak about it at all. We just talked about this episode that we're on right now. So what are your thoughts on episode 8 previously on?
Clip show?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were on a break today.
We were on a break.
Because Friends has the most clip shows I can ever think of in my entire life.
That is true. That is true.
Wait, can I cut in real quick there?
Yeah, sure.
Friends is my latest 25-minute comedy that I'm watching before I go to bed.
God.
Granted, I've watched it 85 times, but every time I get to one of those clip shows, I'm like, oh my God, Skip. I don't want to do this again. Right? There's so many of them.
Yeah, you got to watch them the first time through. But then 100%. After that, cut them out of your diet. 100%.
Sorry to cut you off there.
No. It's a good point. I have my before bed sitcom as well. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, what did I think of this episode? I thought it was better than most, but I don't want to be like that negative guy. Like, I want to have fun. It's Friday night. We're seeing Joe for the first time in forever. But I mean, it still wasn't that good, even though it was better than most. I mean, it's surface level, just like you said. Now, I'm very frustrated with that because I just think the most expensive television show of all time was none of the budget allotted to writing. Did we just pick up people fresh out of film school, and at that, people who maybe didn't study harder than other kids in film school? I mean, I don't know what's going on here. I really don't, because this whole Agnes thing, her being a witch, it was awesome. It's always awesome when it starts out with this show. Like, I'm sucked in. The setting is great. There's this interesting little thing that's going on, and then it's just so boring, and we get back to just this terrible, predictable sort of slog that the show's been. And so we'll dive in and we'll dissect that further, but that's kind of my initial reaction coming into tonight. I hate to be a downer. I'm just got to be honest.
All right. Well, that's good to know early on. It's good to know that you still haven't changed your tune. You're steadfast as always, and I admire you for that. But yeah, so I guess if we're just jumping in on this episode, my whole thing with it is that when I started, I'm like, okay, this is going to be the clip show where they're just going to explain everything. And we're just going to set everything in place so that there's no more questions, so that the next episode will just be mindless action and the audience can just enjoy it and go along with it. Because we know that, because we've been down that road before and we understand these things because we've seen it enough times. And my whole thing is cool. Yay, do your thing, Disney. I'm kind of just with it at this point. I really don't care. This whole thing, when it averages out, will probably maybe be a low 4, high 3.5, maybe. I've kind of already decided that at this point. And while I will say this episode was certainly more enjoyable than most, and we'll start to tackle those elements like as we get more into it, like some of the more internal elements. As far as externally with the story, it's like, but see, this didn't actually contribute anything. This was literally just a delay in a 9-episode series. This was like a delay. This was like a prelude. It's like a denouement to a prelude. I don't even know if that's an actual term or thing. But
I totally disagree with that. But go ahead.
I mean, I guess I'm agreeing with both of you is what I'm trying to say, because Joe, yes, you're right as far as the excitement goes and having something to look forward to each week. And just, the kind of overall enjoyability of the show, just kind of as something to enjoy. But I also understand where Chris is coming from as far as, again,
Sure.
It still feels like it's not living up to its full potential as far as where it should be and where it could be.
Not to make fun of film school writers, I was one myself. It's just that with the MCU, you would think it would be a little more in depth. And Joe, I'll hand it over to you after this. I just kind of want to, this is where I come at it from. It's like, okay, we're playing around with witches now. We're playing around with Phase 4, which has all of these different types of elements previously not seen in the MCU. And so this is kind of like, and I've said this on the show before, but obviously Joe hasn't been on the WandaVision recap series. This is our first impression of Phase 4. And I kind of approached it with an open mind, a fresh slate, because I felt that's what the creators were telling me to do. And so when we have these things like witches and we have like the Vision and, he's not alive, but he is alive, I would just hope it was a little less networky and a little more, I don't know, cinematic universe worthy. It just feels so CW, and I'm frustrated with that.
Oh, CW even.
I'll never go that far. I'll say that this is still a lot of steps above
this
CW.
show should not remind me of a network television show that I watched called Wayward Pines, which was the most network of network shows you could ever see in your life. No, and yet it does.
And I'll tell you what show this reminds me of is Lost. And the reason I say that is because when you end an episode and you still have no goddamn idea what's going on, that's what I think WandaVision's doing. Because what Lost did very well, and I mean this wholeheartedly. I know you guys are laughing, but I mean this wholeheartedly.
Oh no, I'm just laughing because of Chris's reaction, because that's Chris's favorite show, and I don't know if that was intentional or not.
No, it totally was not. That is not pandering.
Because if it was, that'd be incredible. That'd be better than any Community joke I've ever pulled on you.
Please do not speak that name. The best thing that Lost did was they laid breadcrumbs the entire season, right? And it always paid off at the end. That's how I viewed WandaVision, probably from, I guess, the second or third episode. I think there's a reason why they combined the first two when they released not combined, but they released the first two at the same time. I see it as that, you're laying the groundwork for what's to come. The other thing that's very important with this episode is, it was very different than the other episodes that we've seen. But what it did was finally retconned Wanda into the Scarlet Witch. And so they had to do that at some point. And Kevin Feige said that, I think, back in 2016, that they were going to do that at some point. But, she was originally, you saw it in this episode, right? She was the one that was kind of established through Hydra, with the Loki staff and all that stuff. Side note, I hope that we get away from these stones at some point, because
unlikely.
The reliance on this nonstop is killing me.
Part of my frustration, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But I do think that there's a lot that could be that's going to come from this. I think this was a necessary episode to guide us to what's to come. Do I think next week is going to be like the, full-blown whatever happens? It's going to be crazy. I really do believe that next week is going to blow everything wide open, because remember, this leads directly into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which leads directly into Spider-Man. What are we calling it? No Way Home? Is that what it's called?
No Way Home. That's it. No.
They originally said, and I think Feige said this at one point, that it's going to be kind of like a trilogy. Like, they serve as a trilogy in a way, and that's to break open the multiverse. So I do think that this is a necessary evil. It's not as rigidly done as we're used to when it comes to Marvel, but I do think that what they're trying to do is to take people that aren't familiar with these concepts step by step through it, kind of with kid gloves in a way, right? Because it can get confused. It is confusing. I mean, both DC and Marvel have these multiverses and whatever, and you're like, wait, there's 4 Supermen, there's X-Men on every level. What's happening here? but I do think that they're about to really blow things open. So I do think it was a necessary evil, is my point.
Fair enough. I wouldn't even go as far as to call it evil, because I didn't have really gripes with this episode. I actually thought, okay, I mean, if you were going to do a clip show, we don't quite have a sitcom this week, so it still fits with the theme from a filmmaking perspective. I actually thought it was kind of brilliant with the retcon, especially sort of tying that in. It's just that I just think the pacing of this show is just so off. I mean, we get this big reveal, it's Agnes at the end of last week, right? We get that really cool theme song, and then the episode's not really even about her. It's kind of, we go back to Scarlet Witch, and it's like, I get you want to build up to this 9-episode finale. I just think that there's a lot of fat that could have been trimmed from this show, and
you didn't think
you
didn't think today's episode was about Agnes?
I mean, not really. It kind of just felt like she was trying to figure out answers, but obviously through the lens of Scarlet Witch. And so I just wasn't in, like, if you, I guess you can make the argument that it's about Agnes, and maybe that's my issue with this, because if people consider that to be deep or a character study before the finale into the eyes of this villain of the show or whatever, to me that's just so surface level. My brain didn't even think to put 2 and 2 together, because I wanted so much more. So maybe there's just maybe there's a disconnection here. That's kind of because I love reading comics so much, and yet the movies constantly let me down, because I'm the target audience, man. I used to go to comics every Tuesday and buy like a ton.
See, but I think that's a very important point that you just made, is that you're the comic guy, right? Like you know the comics through and through, you know the stories, that's what you did. And I think that where a lot of people, and this goes back to what I was saying about my father liking this, right? He struggles because it's different than the storyline that was established. And that's where I think the MCU struggles a little bit with a wider audience, or I guess I wouldn't say a wider audience, with the specific audience of comic lovers, is that they're taking things and messing with them a little bit. They're changing the origins of certain characters. They're taking Civil War and what started the actual storyline in the comics and switching that up a little bit to make it fit what they've already done in the films. So I totally get where you're coming from, but I do think that if you were to step back from that and look at what they're doing to build a cinematic universe that stands alone, I think they're doing a great job with it, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely universe building obviously is a crucial part of Marvel's infrastructure that they've kind of established. And the one thing that I will say is that even though this episode does hit all of the beats as far as just, establishing where it's going to go for its finale, I will definitely say that my absolute favorite moments were actually the character moments. Because yes, even though it was an exposition dump as far as what Wanda experienced kind of on her way there, and Agnes just kind of being there as kind of as an excuse to guide. I'm not going to give Agnes too much credit anymore, because I feel like kind of all the chips were kind of shown with her reveal, and I think that she's ultimately just going to turn into like either another generic MCU baddie that's probably under the control of a bigger generic MCU baddie, and which is kind of sad, because up until this point, Catherine Hahn has been one of my favorite installments of the show, and so I just think that's a huge detriment to her as an actress. And then But then, like, getting to revisit those moments, like, with Wanda as she was, like, growing up. And you actually, like, weirdly enough, and this feels so ironic considering the fact that I just spent 7 episodes with this character getting to know her through these silly, like, sitcom guises. And now I actually get to see the thing that inspired it. And it's the most emotionally endearing thing I've seen all series, like, throughout this entire thing. And we see the events recontextualized that were spoken of in Age of Ultron. And this series gives so much more legitimacy to that movie that I love, which is hilarious because everybody hates that movie. And I'm like, I love that movie.
I love that movie.
That movie's great.
I hated that movie.
That movie is fucking awesome. And I'm so happy that this series has given so much more legitimacy to it. And yeah, just like, I particularly really like the scene, and I know this line is already getting memed everywhere, and it's annoying me because this scene was actually really great, which is the scene where Vision comes and sits on the bed next to Wanda, and they have that moment like right after the attack in Nigeria, obviously in the whole Sokovia Accords meeting. It was really touching, and it was really endearing, and like, I think that this episode actually, weirdly enough, like individually, like as an episode, the story itself that we were seeing did the best job as far as like building up the tension that leads to Wanda's break. Like, it doesn't feel like an out of nowhere thing. It feels like something that actually, like, okay, a real person with this much power would logistically do. It's like, you're supposed to be the winner. You got brought back after losing 5 years of your life, and you have to go through this now.
Well, and
it's
Dom,
like,
I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that's the the most specific example of sort of diving into characters like a love story or a who people are that we've ever gotten in the MCU.
Yeah.
Maybe aside from Captain
Tony and
America's
Pepper?
back. Well,
Maybe.
Tony and Pepper even was a little superficial, I think, to me. Or face
and
level.
The MCU, not good on romance. Really not good on romance. What's the best one we've got so far? Scott and Hope from the Ant-Man movies?
Maybe, actually.
I think so. They've been together the most solid, throughout the most movies.
Can we talk about Catherine Hahn a little bit? Because
I definitely want to.
Please.
I love her personally as an actress in general. Every movie that she's in, like if you're talking about Step Brothers or you're talking about Parks and Recreation, her character in that is one of my favorite characters. I gotta be honest, the rumor from the very beginning of WandaVision was that obviously Agnes would be Agatha Harkness related to Wanda, breaks open the magic stuff. I was very lukewarm about her in this role, but the past 2 episodes I've actually, and especially tonight's, I really am all about it. I think she brings a different energy that we haven't seen. And she's kind of that like lovable, she's funny. Like today in the episode where, are we allowed to talk, or we're talking spoilers, right?
Yes, we're talking spoilers.
Go for it.
When they're at the first Christmas, what's a frick's it called when they go back in Christmas and talk about see old scenes or whatever, and they're back in Sokovia and it's before the bomb hits or whatever, and the brother Pietro's yelling and she's like, we're right here, and then he yells again, she's like, we're still right here. That comedy is freaking hilarious, but then you end the episode with her being the witch that she is. And that was so, I don't know. I just think that's such a different type of character than we've seen, because most Marvel characters are established as one thing.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And the thing that I kind of also loved about this is that it's showing Wanda for who she truly is, and it's showing that she has a future as a character, kind of just internally. That is the one thing I will say that the MCU does get right amongst their many flaws, is they really do a good job with the casting and the nailing of all these characters. I have to say, there's not a single miscast in the entire MCU, and any of them that might have potentially happened were cut out early on in the phases. So I always have to give credit to that. They always do a very good job of humanizing their characters, and this is the best example we're seeing yet. You're right. This is the most, I feel inside a character's head that we may have gotten since Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I feel that was a very, very internal MCU movie, and it was kind of a really, it was nice because we had that and Guardians of the Galaxy back to back, and the reason why those two are usually hailed as the 2 best MCU movies is because they're 2 of the most internal. Guardians 1 is completely internal for Pratt the entire time.
That's a great point. The other thing to remember here, and this goes against Chris a little bit here, but with the way that this show has moved forward, we haven't got this with the MCU before. Sure, we've seen it with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and what was the Inhumans that I think was on for a short
7 episodes?
Yeah. But
they cancel that shit real quick.
But we've never had the time. And when you add up the time that's in each of these episodes, so we're at 8 episodes now, say 25 minutes an episode ish, right? So we're at about, what's that? Over 3 hours.
Yeah.
They're spending more time on these characters. And I think that that's something we're going to have to get used to with seeing Disney Plus shows that are taking a longer time to develop. However, I do think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is going to be more like Bourne Identity Ultimatum type action.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
That's what you get with television. My camera's being a little weird right now, so I'll fix that. But
no, you're good.
That's I think part of what we're going to have to get used to with the MCU now diving into episodic television.
Yeah.
So it's strange because to say that I hate this show is a lie, but to say that I love the show is also a lie. But I can say that I love so much of this show, parts of this show rather, so much more than the first 3 phases of the MCU. And the lows of this show do not come anywhere near close to the lows of the first 3 phases. For me, for surface level as this show is, I thought the first 3 phases were really cookie cutter, and that was a big part of my sort of aversion to going and seeing them and playing catch up later on when I realized what a phenomenon it was and I wanted to be a part of it. But So we've improved, but let's talk about Agnes. I want to go back to Agnes because I wanted to chime in there. I really love her as an actress. I think she's awesome. She's funny. She's charming. Everything you guys said. It's obviously undeniable. But this character she's playing just to me feels like she's doing all the work and they were just banking on her being so talented and so natural. There's no depth here. It's like I'm not invested in her. You know, I don't care that she was there from the first episode and that she's a witch. They haven't gotten me. I'm not hooked. You know, okay, so she's playing this game with Wanda and she's admiring her powers, but okay, that she's powerful too. They showed that scene and it's like every time they give us one thing, they don't back it up. So the one thing of value, that scene in the beginning with her at the coven and she obviously not even trying, sort of just naturally this inner power sort of obviously she bests the rest of the coven, and I think that's a correlation to Wanda and how Wanda
including
is
her mother,
including her mother. So that shows, wow, she's kind of heartless. That was her mother, but maybe she's not in control of it. And so that's obviously the tie-in, the comparison to Wanda right now, who's casting this giant realm over Westview, and she doesn't know she's doing it, but she's one-upping Agnes because, you know, she's not only casting this world and reviving Vision, but she's actually playing a part in it and not even realizing she's doing it. So they're trying to say, like, we're maybe not that different, but they didn't, I don't know, like, I don't care that there might be a connection between them. You know what I mean? I don't care about any of it because these characters, aside from, I think, our two leads, Vision and Wanda, who I think now we really can justify as amazing players. And I'm actually frustrated that they were so in the background for all those big movies because I think they actually are really great. But I just don't care about, like, where we're going with this story, and having, you know, amazing aesthetics and scenery and mise en scène and great actors does not make up for the fact that, like, it's thin. So that, like, I'm very frustrated by her because it's not her fault. And
can I tell you my theory on this?
Yeah, go for it.
So here's my theory. I think the reason we're feeling that way, because I kind of feel it too. You know, at the end of the day, I like her as a character. I like her as an actress, but I don't feel like she is the big bad of the show because I don't think she is. I do still think that she is one of the henchmen in this whole thing. And I think next week we're going to find out. I do really believe that Mephisto is coming into play here. I'm not sure if you guys have talked about that in the past, but
we have.
I do think Mephisto is coming into play. Yeah. They kind of played with that a little bit today because remember last week, everyone was thinking the whole, like, the fly, which actually was a cicada. They were like, oh yeah, that's Mephisto. And then today she just fed whatever it was to that bunny who that's probably Mephisto. Come on, it's MCU. But you got that in play, and you also have the fact that we haven't seen Emma Caulfield's character since the second episode and one other random scene. She's the blonde that was like I forget her name in the show.
The second episode.
You know who I'm talking about, though?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I don't.
They nodded to her in this episode too, I believe, right?
For a brief second, I believe, but I do think there's more at play here. And the reason I say that as well is because the other piece of it is, remember last week they kind of showed you that book very quickly?
Yeah.
And that book is going to come into play because it is not just Agatha Harkness's book. Like, that goes back to full magic, full Doctor Strange. And if you saw what a lot of people were finding on Facebook and Twitter today, if you go back to the first Doctor Strange movie, when they're looking at the Ancient One's private collection of books, there's a book missing.
Okay. That's kind of cool.
Part of me is like,
yeah, they still do their homework. They still do their homework as far as planning Easter eggs goes.
And so my question is, did they plan that out the entire way? Or is it kind of just like, oh, well, this works. Like, we can make this work. I do think that they had an expectation that we're going to get back to it at some point. Because I don't think you introduce a character like Doctor Strange, who is a through line in a lot of the comics, without, you know, planning for these big reveals. But that's, I think, a big piece of what we're seeing here, and I think next week's going to blow that wide open.
So you think that the opening scene was like kind of like an intro to like kind of seeing the really big reveal with Agnes next week?
We haven't seen magic much. I mean, outside of Doctor Strange, you know, now what we're doing, and this is, I mean, I'm going to jump into something different real quick, and then you retcon me in a second, like this episode did Wanda, but you know, the other thing that I think they're doing here is opening up a world where mutants exist, because Scarlet Witch is the first real mutant that we've dealt with in the MCU. But then you also see what happened with Monica last week when she went through, and they were talking the week before about it changing her genetic makeup. that's how I think they're going to get into the X-Men and pieces like that. I think that the blip changed up some of the genetics in some of the people that were blipped, and that's how we're going to ultimately get to the X-Men. That's not going to happen in WandaVision, but I think that's laying the groundwork for it. So while the show itself might seem like it's kind of scattered and we're all over the place, they're taking us from the logistical, grounded, vibranium that builds a lot of the weapons and Vision, the stones that we've dealt with and been focused on forever, Tony Stark's company building all of the stuff that ultimately impacts the entire MCU, and now getting us into more of the less connected from reality. And I think that's where things are going to get different. And if you don't like that type of stuff, you're going to struggle with what's coming, because the rest of the MCU is not grounded in reality.
Yeah, they're going full on comic book with it, and they're definitely leaning into that nature as they're going on. And obviously they're not going to stop, because they're still tremendously successful, as we say every single week. It's kind of getting repetitive at this point, but just as far as like kind of how this is going to factor into the future of the MCU, I got to say I'm excited, because again, they still have these really interesting trajectory arcs forward and they certainly still know how to keep an audience engaged with just the right amount of action and banter. And the acting is still really good, and the characterizations are still really, really good as well. And that's kind of, and that's just like why I've been enjoying it in general,
Yeah, I think one of the saving graces of this episode, and I think the reason why it's one of the stronger episodes of the season, is because the character moments were really solid. And so, Joe, everything you just said gets me excited, but is that all they have? Is there anything deeper? Because for years I've been missing the magic. And to me, it's just not enough. It's really not enough. So
how's to counter that, how's it not enough to dive into mutants, magic, and all of the stuff that blows open the entire MCU?
Because I use the Agnes character as an example. Like, on paper, it sounds awesome, but then seeing it and having it be so thin and just not having them weave this web and like it should be. I think it's just they should be.
We're not done yet, buddy.
I know that's true, but I mean, I just could really going into the finale. I really could care less, to be honest with you. Like, I'm gonna have a great time with my friends on the panel next Friday night. We're obviously gonna have a lot to talk about, but as a fan, as a viewer, I really do not care, to be honest with you. I mean, having these beautiful character moments this episode, getting to see her and Quicksilver as little kids was awesome. I love that whole sort of wartime sitcom night that they were having. I mean, that is more the stuff I want, but it's like every time they give me the realism, because I think when you take the characters off the page and put them on the screen, there needs to be some realism, because there's actual people playing them.
Right.
And you can get more of emotion that way. You can get nonverbal language. You can get so much more than you can get on the page when you are on the screen, and it's never there for me. It's like that amazing through lines written out, they've had it for years. It's just not enough for me, because I also want to feel like I'm watching a movie, and movies have a lot of layers and a lot of textures. And those are just things I always find missing in the MCU for me, outside of Thor in the Dark World.
Outside of what? Thor the Dark World?
Thor the Dark World.
Yeah.
He loves that movie.
I actually really enjoy that movie too. So,
oh my God.
Wait, so can we, I don't know if you're going into this, but can we talk about something else that happened in this episode?
Sure.
We saw the commercials from the previous episodes come to life. And I don't know if you guys caught this, but
I did not, to be honest with you.
Was it her parents, like they were all saying?
Here we
I
go.
honestly wasn't paying attention to it.
Here we go. Episode 1 was the toaster. It was the Stark Industries toaster. So number 1, you're talking about Stark. And number 2, if you remember back to that, the only color that we saw on that was the light going off. It was the red light. So when you go to the first memory, when they go back and the bomb drops, it's a Stark bomb with the red flashing light. So that relates back to the first commercial. The second commercial was the Hydra watch. It was the Strucker, I think it was, if you remember that. It was the whole watch commercial,
yep,
which relates to the memory of her going into the Hydra thing with, Loki's staff and all that stuff. The third one was the Hydra, what was it called? Hydra Soak, I think it was. It was
something
like
like that. Yeah.
everything was
good memory.
Everything
Yeah,
was
right. I'm like, did you take notes on all this?
I don't have a life. This is me being a nerd. The third one was like where the mother was running around, everything was chaotic and everything was crazy. Chaos magic. So what we saw play out in this episode was 3 of the commercials, which gives meaning to the first 3 episodes.
Wow.
What
You're saying
what
is
we
this
still have at play is 4 more commercials, which ends with the Nexus, which I think opens up the Multiverse of Madness.
Wow. That was
It's been fun. See you later.
That was kind of cool.
Incredible, like, detective work. Honestly, I feel like you just gave validation to our entire recap show right now that we've been doing these last
for real.
7 weeks.
I think about it way too much.
Now I just feel stupid about my analysis.
Yeah, the only kind of ending critique that I have before we go on to MVPs and connections to the greater overall comic universe with Joe is going to be like even more your moment to shine. How do we feel about the fact that the vision that's currently inside of the Hex is imaginary, but it still feels like the real Vision, whereas technically the Vision's body that's not actually him anymore is like just like back as like an emotionless corpse? Like, do we want to talk about that? Because there was relatively little Vision in this episode. When he was in there, he was fantastic, but there was relatively little Vision in this episode as compared to the last couple.
Yeah, I think it's actually really kind of cool because I'm wondering there's so many theories you can spin off on that. You know, did she create a clone? She has magic. They talked about necromancy, but then again, traditional necromancy, you need like a bone or something, an actual tangible piece of the person or deceased to bring them back.
I love that you said traditional necromancy.
I play a lot of I play a lot of D&D and Skyrim and stuff. Anyways, yeah, you know. So that could be cool. And what if Wanda maybe kept like a piece of his cape or something and we didn't, but I doubt it's going to be that. I mean, it could be an illusion. There's a lot of possibilities at play. He does feel very lifelike, and he did have that conversation with Darcy last week, which really they did throw me off with that. But I don't know, Joe, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a creation of Wanda. I think it's part of her powers that created this specific world that, you know, everyone was as she wanted them to be. It was that perfect world based on him buying the plot of land that they would live in Westview, New Jersey. The conversation with Darcy last week, I do think that we saw him trying to understand exactly what was happening, but not identifying the fact that he doesn't have memories from prior to Westview, and remember, this is all happening in a few days or something too. And we're not talking about 9 weeks as we're all experiencing. So I do think that there is something to be said there for him just being a figment. Maybe this isn't the right way to say it, but a figment of her imagination in a sense. And I do also believe that her kids are the same. Because back to the comics, one of the big storylines in the comics is that the kids are created from pieces of Mephisto. And when Mephisto comes back to be, he consumes them. He brings them back into him and the kids are gone. And I do think that's what they're playing with here. Because I can't imagine.
Wow.
I'm going to argue against myself right here. Part of me can't imagine that they're going to continue with these kids, but the other side of it is they alluded 2 episodes ago, I guess it was the Halloween episode, when they were dressed as we learned about their powers. They also, in one of the comic runs, are young Avengers, and they could play into what, we're seeing with Hawkeye and with Cassandra Lang and all that stuff. So that's a lot of stuff I just spit out at you, but I don't know that we're going to see Vision as the Vision that we knew prior to Infinity War. We're about to see the weaponized version of him that doesn't have humanity, doesn't have a conscience, doesn't have morals. And I think that's going to be really interesting because ultimately my belief is we're going to see Monica have to band together with Wanda and potentially Agnes jump in there too to take him down.
God damn it, Joe. You're making me hate every single thing I've said negative about the MCU up to this point.
Wow.
It all does sound so interesting. I mean,
I hope it
man.
does that.
I might
really
be singing
hope
a
it does
completely
that.
different tune soon.
Man. One more episode to go. Chris, have you ever been turned around on a show with just one episode?
Yeah, Mandalorian. The first season.
That's a good point.
I thought it was the last 2 episodes.
Yeah, but the finale sealed the deal.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
let's be honest, you know?
Chris, this isn't a knock at all, but the way I always view movies that are in like trilogy. So I thought about I always think about the last 3 Star Wars movies. Bad example because they were not necessarily connected very well, but that's when I walked out of Last Jedi, I said, let's see how it ends. That's how I always am with TV shows. I'm like, okay, well, take some, leave some, but let's see how it ends. How can you bring it all together? And the one thing about the MCU that they've always done very well is pick up those seeds that they've planted in the past and make them flourish to drive a point home that they wanted to do. So I'm hopeful that that's what we're about to see next week. But also in saying that, we have a lot of characters to balance next week. A lot of people that we haven't seen in a little bit. Like we didn't see anyone outside of Catherine Hahn and Wanda. You know, I'm saying the actress's name as well as the character's name, but you know, we have not seen anyone outside of them in the past week. So what's going on with Monica, Pietro, that UPS/postal driver? There's something going on with him. He has a bunny on his hat. I don't know if you realized that last week. There's a bunny on his hat. She's always carrying around a bunny. I don't know. Just saying. There's
symbology.
There's a lot to go on.
There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to discuss just overall going in. So unless anyone else really has anything else to add before we get into it. So we're going to jump quick into MVPs of the episode before we talk about connections to the greater overall comic book.
Wait, can I stop you real quick?
What?
Ask a question.
Okay.
Luke just brought up the Cameo rumor. Are we going to talk about that?
We will talk about that for the final episode. We'll talk about that in rumors for the final episode. So for the MVP section, Joe, in case you weren't sure how this one worked, that is basically where we pick an element of the episode, an individual element that could be a character, an actor, a director, a person who works behind the scenes, just an element overall of the episode that we thought was the best overall. We've picked some very unique choices in the past for both this and The Mandalorian. And for this week, my choice is going to be, well, I mean, I can literally only pick Wanda because Wanda and Agnes were the only 2 real subjects in this episode. And it certainly wasn't Agnes. So by default, I have to pick Wanda. But no, I am serious in that this is the most, what's the word? Internal that we've ever gotten with Wanda. Like just the simple act of like actually watching her get in the car and drive away when she could have easily just flown anywhere. Just even like that little moment alone and seeing just like that initial drive and that build up to Westview, I'm like, wow, this is like actually really internal and I actually feel something for this character. So for that alone, I'm like, okay, I give all the props in the world to Wanda for that specific, what made this episode great overall. Who wants next?
Chris, go for it.
Sounds good, man. I'm gonna obviously have to go with Wanda as well. Although this was like the first time in a long time where the score made my ears perk up, but it was only because this was one of the rare instances, in my opinion, in this show where all the elements of filmmaking came together for magical moments. Like that scene, guys, where they're in the apartment in Russia and the wars going on outside. I mean, it might just be because I'm taking a few journalism classes right now and like learning some things I don't want to talk about on our show, but that really hit home, because that felt so unfortunately true to what some people have to live and go through, and the way that the parents handled it, trying to put the smile on. And then that moment where the explosion happens and you see the kids rock forward and they cut just at the perfect time. I thought that was really brilliant filmmaking. And so I think I'm going to have to go with like little kid Wanda. That actress was just so convincing of someone who like they knew the parents were trying to be strong for them, but they were also little kids. And I mean, they're super charming, but since this was the Wanda centric like clip show episode, I gotta go with Wanda and possibly both of them. I'm torn, but the little kid was great. I gotta give her a nod because as much problems I do have with this show and like the thin writing, this week really justified a character that I've kind of always wanted more of. So I gotta be happy when that happens,
Yes, absolutely.
That's a great point. I'll also say though, in that scene, we saw where the episodic nature of the show came from, with the whole like DVDs that were in the the suitcase and stuff. I think that was really a unique way to go about it. And I like that we got that explanation later in the show. I like when things pay off. But here's my thing with when we're talking about MVP. New York Minute, It Takes Two, Passport to Paris, Double Toil and Trouble. The Olsen twins have nothing on their sister, Lizzie Olsen, because Lizzie Olsen is delivering in this show. She has not been given the time to do so, except for that fantastic line from Endgame, where she says, "You took everything from me." And Thanos says, "I don't even know who you are." And she goes, "You will." That's one of the best lines in the entire MCU. But for her to, I think, dive deep into a character like this, it's just been really fun to see. And she took a character that I didn't care about before and made her someone that I'm very interested to see how they continue to develop. But I also will recognize Catherine Hahn, because I do think that she is out of her element when it comes to anything outside of comedy. But I like how she's able to intertwine her comedy with the story, and those two together were very good this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, I did like their chemistry. I just wish she was written better.
It was one of those duo episodes where it's like, oh, we're just going to have these two characters and they're going to revisit all of these memories. And we've never seen this before. But yeah, they have good chemistry, so it worked out overall. So now we're going to move on to the last segment of the show, that being the connections to the greater MCU and the comic book lore that inspired it. So this week, I'm not going to dive too deep with what we see in the episode itself, mostly just because the episode answers a few questions, and just the specific comic book lines with the Vision I'm not as familiar with, just as far as him coming back, but like without a soul. I'm assuming that's leading to a bigger storyline that's going to lead to something bigger down the road. But the thing that the thing that we saw big that happened was kind of building towards the final episode. And like, obviously we know it's like, okay, we still feel like there are going to be some final reveals. But the thing that I think was really cool was, again, seeing just where we're going, as far as, to me, the most interesting element will be what the ripple effects are that this has, and how this ends up, like, if they're doing the reverse House of M in order to have Wanda create the mutants. Like, that's what I'm looking forward to the most. That is what I really think they're doing. Obviously, again, the Evan Peters Quicksilver, hopefully that will be revealed next week as well. But I like that this episode, like, this was the first episode that we didn't get any Monica Rambeau or Jimmy Woo or Darcy. We barely even got any Vision in this episode, except for Wanda's flashbacks. Like, this was an entirely internal episode for me. Like, that's the thing, Chris. Like, to me, like, this harkens back to like the 8th episode of House of Haunting of Bly Manor. You know, like with the Lady of the Lake episode, and then like that's kind of what I harken this back to. And it's interesting because obviously, again, comic books can only allow for a certain type of storytelling, and shows also allow for a different type of storytelling, and that's kind of what I appreciated about seeing this as a show. Now, as far as the comic book lore that inspires it, I think that this might be like the best adaptation of how they've ever done Wanda, just as far as a character. No, I'm serious, because like kind of the character in the comics has always been like this kind of subterfuge for just endless grief, and just the fact that she is ultimately not in control of her actions, and her actions are used ultimately as plot devices in order to cause much needed comic book gigantic story shifts. But like, I mean, can we talk about that for a second? Like how this show like kind of takes her powers from the comics and actually like amplifies them in a way that like makes sense and is also like cool to witness and makes her like actually powerful and different from other heroes that we've seen on screen before.
Well, so I think what they're doing is, I don't know that it's that different, honestly. I think what they're doing is introducing it in a different way and playing with it in a different way. But I think that you're seeing her powers come to fruition the same way that they did in the comics in different. Here's the thing with comics. They retcon everything all the time. You can have 18 different storylines that are all about the same character, getting the same powers, doing whatever. But I think what the MCU is doing is morphing them together to try to make it work for what they want to do in the future. And I, like I said earlier, I do think it's part of that magic plus mutants plus, you know, otherworldly stuff that we're about to see once the multiverse opens up. But I like how they're handling her. I wish that she would have had more to do in the first, 23 movies. She wasn't really a big part of them. And when you think about Quicksilver in and of himself, was that one movie Did he die in Ultron?
One movie.
Yeah.
One
So,
movie.
I'm not a big fan of Aaron Taylor Johnson, so I'm quite all right with that. But I don't know. I don't think we're gonna. So this I'm cutting out to another topic here. But Dom, you mentioned Pietro. I don't know that we're gonna get much payoff with him. Because I think what we're seeing
He's
is
just
that
gonna, so it's just going to be like another Quicksilver just randomly running around this MCU verse, and we're not going to get like
Can they
any
just not
answers
handle
to
that character?
I mean, I don't think it's
no one
like,
can handle him. Literally, no one can handle him.
but I don't know that I want them to here because the way that we were introduced to him in the MCU was with Aaron Taylor Johnson. He was shot, whatever. They talked about that today in this episode with Catherine Hahn drawing reference to that, and they had to bring in the other one. I don't know that we're going to get much payoff with that, honestly. But I do think that what they're doing is trying to bring as much of the comics in as they can in terms of what drove Wanda to become one of the most powerful beings and villains, quite honestly, in the MCU before she went back to being an Avenger. It's kind of interesting how they did it here. She was like, she hated Tony Stark with her brother, became an Avenger, is now flipping to the dark side, so to speak. I'm thinking, well, what's going to happen after that?
Yeah, I think that's a solid sort of guesstimation of her trajectory. This could be her, prequel moment, like Anakin style, which would be, I guess, interesting. It's just, I don't know. For me, I guess one of the biggest issues with the MCU is never feeling comfortable in the moment because they always have so much planned down the pipeline that it almost doesn't make it special, and I almost can't take it for what it is at that point in time because they always have to have me thinking about 10, 20, 40 films maybe. I mean, at this point.
That's a very good point.
And so it kind of takes me out of it. But to sort of get back to Dom's original sentiment here, I'll be completely honest with you guys. I have not really seen too much of her in the comics. I've seen her in like the bigger sort of issues. I think I read Civil War like in 2016, and I don't remember it too well. Deadpool Kills the MCU is hilarious, but that's obviously one of its own. I've been more of a DC guy because I like that darker edge, but what I can say about Scarlet Witch is she is that darker side of the MCU. She is sort of that not perfect, not sort of, billionaire playboy backstory. Like she has a little dirt under her fingernails, and I like that. I'm hoping that Phase 4 can echo her sentiment of who she has become in this WandaVision show and who she is in the comics that I know, because she gives me hope of not following this cookie cutter style storyline 3 phases that we've already gotten. Does that make sense? That's kind of why I was drawn to her.
It totally makes sense because the way that you're talking about DC and the reason you like DC is why I like DC. They dive deep into those emotions. We've touched on them in the MCU in the past, obviously with different characters that have been, impacted by different tragedies, but we've never dealt with that grief. And this whole show is dealing with that grief. And I think that's very different for Marvel. And I'm hoping that they continue to do that in the future, just diving into what makes them, I don't want to say human, because obviously we don't want to like take away their development and stuff like that, but gives them those human emotions that we all connect with, which is what's going to bring us into the shows and the movies better.
Yeah. I feel that. Oh, sorry, Dom. What were you going to say?
No. I was just going to say that I totally agree with that, and just kind of the overall sentiment of where the show's going, just in general, and how it's going to factor in. Like, honestly, I'm not going to lie. Out of all of my debuts, obviously Iron Man will always be special, but this might be my favorite debut for like any phase of the MCU, because Civil War gets weaker and weaker by the day, and Iron Man 3 is one of my top 3 least favorite MCU movies. So. Take that as for what you will, but for this to like kind of be like the kickoff for the MCU Phase 4, yeah. It's not the best thing that I've ever seen, but it's also not even close to being the worst. And I'm still very excited for what's going to happen next week. Like, here's the thing, Joe, and maybe you can get on board with this. I'm kind of hoping for, like, if I could just, like, get on the casting couch real quick, I'm kind of hoping that Cumberbatch does another one of his famous double castings where he plays both the villain and the hero in the movie. He has done that solid, like, twice now.
What would the villain be?
Mephisto.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
He's done that before. He plays Smaug and Sauron in the Hobbit movies, and he plays Doctor Strange and voices Dormammu in the first Doctor Strange movie.
I will
He's done
say
it twice. He has a precedent for it.
I will say I do think we're going to see him next week. I honestly believe that. Are we allowed to talk about the cameo yet? The rumored cameo? Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, Luke's been dying for it. Let's
there
do
we
it.
go.
Absolutely.
So I 1000% hope that it is Reed Richards and leading up to Fantastic Four. I don't believe it's going to be.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah,
way
it's not
too.
because they don't want me as a fan. They don't want people like me as a fan. So it's obviously not gonna be.
It's way too early.
Specifically, if it's not John Krasinski as him, right?
If they were to bring in John Krasinski next week, I would break not only the internet but my computer screens. I would be so pumped. I think that would be such a great thing. The only reason that I'm holding out a little hope in that area is because they talked about it for 2 episodes. And then last week's episode, it was kind of like, hey, we're moving on to this, the general that's like, I don't know if she was a general or whatever in the army, but she's like, yeah, did he build it to your specifications? That like little, van thing. So I'm hoping that we just haven't seen it paid off yet, because it's kind of like they introduced it, got us to forget about it, and then want to smack us in the face with it next week. That's my hope. But I do believe that we're going to see Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
I'm looking forward to it because let me tell you something. Ever since Infinity War, which he was the best in, I have wanted more Doctor Strange. And I hope that we will finally actually get some of that going forward. And
same.
Yeah. The only
I just want to say one last thing about Krasinski, if that's
Yes.
okay. I usually don't really get behind fan castings because I usually get let down. Like Rosario Dawson being Ahsoka was pretty awesome that actually happened. But what I will say about that is, if everyone, I mean, maybe people are more in tune with the MCU than I am, and I'm sure that's the case. But if everyone's thinking Cumberbatch, I'd want like a Krasinski or a let's go complete. If this is the debut after the click, the bang, the snap, the blip, whatever they call it, I don't know. I just sounded like I just hit all the Three Stooges ad-lib noises from back in the day.
The click, the bang, the snap.
You sound like the guy. You sound like the sound technician guy from Spaceballs.
Oh wow, that's
the
true.
The creeps and the squeaks.
Or like the did you hear the story last week of Tom Holland auditioning for Star Wars? He said, yeah, I was auditioning with this woman who was supposed to be a droid, and she said bloop 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 bloop.
That's awesome. I didn't see that.
Star Wars has their own droid speaking cast members.
Right.
That's great. That's a really that must be a fun casting room part to read.
Yeah, right.
So I guess like what I'm trying to say is like just take the risk, man. It's going to be awesome. Krasinski's in super good shape now, too, after doing that Jack Ryan show. You got to get that while it's good. Like, come on, man.
I honestly think that missing out on Krasinski and Emily Blunt is like going to be the biggest mistake. But hey, they might
what?
Jennifer Lawrence as Invisible Woman, which I'm like, oh, gross.
That's not happening.
Gross.
But here's the thing with the John Krasinski and Emily Blunt thing is I usually don't get behind fan casting like you're talking about, Chris. But I do think here we haven't heard denials. We haven't heard anything about it really outside of the fans, which makes me believe that they may be feeding into it a little bit, which would also be the first time that the MCU is doing that, because they're very good about like grabbing random ass people to be these characters and building them into good stars. But I will also say that with, we didn't know Blade was going to be something before last year. It was announced with Mahershala Ali. So I'm hopeful that I think John Krasinski would do a great job, honestly.
Yeah. No, of all the fan castings that I've heard, I am still secretly hoping that it is him, although I'm also still rooting for my boy Ewan McGregor, even though I know that there's no way that's happening now because he's already playing young Obi-Wan. But
He's
I put
too
it out
old
into
for
the
it.
ether.
I was just going to say he might be too old, but that'd be awesome, Dom. That'd be even better than
That
John
would be
Krasinski.
So cool,
I agree with
right?
that. He's
That
a
would
great
be
actor.
so cool. Yeah, because the good thing about getting Krasinski now, too, is that Krasinski is roughly Chris Pratt's age, which is good.
True.
But I also love how this whole like kind of magic saga is going to officially culminate in the 3rd Spider-Man movie. And can we just talk about that for a second? And the massive glutton of superhero news that we got this past week. Like, what? I feel like we were just slammed nonstop. First with release dates, then with the Troll title release, and then obviously with the Superman news today. Like, it's kind of weird.
Can we not talk about that one? I'm so hurting.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird just to be like in this age where it's like we could still be surprised by this stuff, It feels like we always get stuff like every single day, and then it's like, boom, they drop all this stuff in a week. And I'm like,
Can
what?
I just go? I want to go on the record.
Yes.
I want to go on the record as saying, if DC / Warner Brothers gets rid of Henry Cavill as Superman, I am going to lose my shit. I will burn things down. Theoretically, I will be very upset. I'll complain about it wherever I can. But that is such a huge loss because he is the first actor since Christopher Reeve, I think, that's really embodied that character. And he's not been given the opportunity. So if they're done with Snyder, which it sounds like WB is, tonight someone asked Snyder on Vero, like, hey, are you going to come back to another DC movie or whatever? And he said, it's not my decision. Or I guess they said, like, why are you not or something? And he said, it's not my decision, which sounds like he's done. What are you doing there? Like, Cavill has not had the opportunity to fully play this character with a good story outside of Man of Steel, which is a great movie in my opinion. And I also love Batman vs Superman, but you need to give him more ability to develop this character. And if you want to take it in another direction, take it in another direction with him. He's a great actor. The other piece of it is, we're getting into DC stuff here, so like, tell me to shut up when you want me to. But
No,
the other piece of it is you have the Snyder Cut coming out on March 18th, and on February 26th, you announce a reboot of Superman. What are you so afraid of? Why are you announcing a reboot of Superman and not even talking about Cavill as Superman 3 weeks before you're releasing a movie, a 4-hour movie that you're hoping is going to make you money on a streamer? And that drives me.
The funny thing is that it is going to make the money. There are going to be millions of people who watch that. So I don't know why they're just making a big stink about that. I think they're just using that as a publicity stunt.
Here's why: because they don't know what. Are we allowed to curse?
Yes.
Yeah, go for
They
it.
don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Oh well, yeah, that's been established. That's been more than established at this point.
If you are Warner Brothers and you purchase DC, you acquire DC, which has a pantheon of characters, and you fuck it up this much over how many years? It kills me. It absolutely kills me.
It's time for a new 52.
Yeah,
if you
right.
guys get that right.
I totally agree with that.
Absolutely. They need
But
well, that's what they're trying to do with Flashpoint. So
Here's the thing, though. I mean, you got a multiverse. Use it. If you want a new superhero, how cool would it be to see two Supermen on the same screen at the same time?
yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, just do something different. I'm not a writer, and I'm not claiming to be. I was a film school student of writing, didn't graduate, so take everything I say with a grain of salt in that regard. But yeah, I feel your frustration there, Joe. It's almost like the internet gave the Snyder Cut life, and Warner Brothers kind of couldn't beat the hashtag in this situation.
They didn't know how to handle it.
No.
Did you guys read the Vanity Fair article, by the way?
Which one?
So there's a Vanity Fair article where they interview Zack Snyder, and people always accuse me of being like a huge like Snyder Cut person. I'm excited to see the movie. I want to see the movie. I love DC. But after reading this article, you understand a lot more of what happened behind the scenes with Justice League, and it kind of paints Zack Snyder in a different light. I highly recommend reading it because it's just a really good investigative journalistic read.
I'll check it out.
Interesting.
Dom, what was some of the other movie news that you wanted to sort of touch base on?
The Loki and Bad Batch release dates for June 11th and May 4th. That's pretty cool, just as far as how Disney Plus is looking for like a little bit of a shakeup on their programming front. What else?
Yeah, but
Something
apparently
else
Bad
got a
Batch
release
was
date.
really met with some criticism.
Which is, yeah, and not to mention the fact that also on the upcoming front, Cherry, the new movie starring Tom Holland, not getting good reviews from our fellow people of the community.
Yeah, I saw that too. What's going on? I mean, we're
don't know,
finally getting
dude.
content. Are we just all ungrateful?
No, do you want to talk about Cherry?
I
Not
haven't
yet
seen
because
it,
we
so-
haven't seen it. So save that one for later.
Here's all I'll say. It's a mess. It's a mess.
Bummer.
They try a lot. I was very excited for it. It's a mess.
Yes, well,
I'm still going to
hopefully-
try and stay excited, but obviously Dom and I have seen what people have been saying at least, and that's.
But here's
tough to
the
combat.
thing. How many times have you seen reviews from other people and they're like, "Oh, it's horrendous" or whatever, and you watch it and you're like,
Plenty of times.
I actually dig this."
Plenty.
So
of times.
keep an open mind because who knows?
Yeah.
Exactly, and
I'm
then that
excited for the
MODOK
Russos.
show, Dom.
Yeah, I sent
really?
Chris the clip of the MODOK show. I just saw that randomly. I'm like, oh shit, okay, so we're still like getting something entertaining. And
What's
Patton Oswalt's still banking checks from Disney. So
What else is new?
right? All right. So with that being said, I think that's pretty much everything that we have to say tonight for this episode of WandaVision, guys. Again, not a whole lot to talk about, but don't worry. If you guys want, this was kind of like our little quiet lowdown, little bit of a more easy, relaxing time that we've had on this show, on this kind of series of recaps that we've had. We're gonna have like a week break once this is done, and we'll be back with Falcon and Winter Soldier in 2 weeks after that. That's going to be a fun one to recap. But next week is going to be the big shebang, the big finale, Chris. We're going to have as many people as StreamYard will allow us to have on screen at one time.
True.
10.
Which unfortunately is 10. But we are going to attempt to have everyone that we have had on the show from the beginning. So that, of course, being David, John Burns of Burns Reviews, Alex Figueroa of Levels of the Geeks, Basic Entertainment, Certain Vids, potentially the Cerulli brothers, although I want to save them for a potential surprise date that comes after that.
Yeah, we might have to save them.
We're going to have a lot of people on this episode, to say the least. And
AJ reacts too, and of course, ours truly, Joe.
Yes, of course. Yeah, we're going to have everyone, guys. We're going to have literally everyone, and it's going to be amazing. And you guys should definitely come because it's going to be a big finale. And Chris, you think it's going to be bigger than Lovecraft and Mandalorian finales?
Yeah, not in terms of our show. Okay, so in terms of WandaVision, bigger than Lovecraft, obviously not bigger than Mandalorian by any means.
Although I had fun with Lovecraft, because Lovecraft, we were just roasting the shit out of that finale in that terrible season. Yeah,
but Lovecraft was like a really fun recap to do, and I do think in terms of our show now, talking TV verse, the TVU.
Yes.
Oh, that's such a stretch. In terms of the TVU, I think that what we have planned for you guys tomorrow night, if you loved the WandaVision finale, you have a place to come and have even more fun. If you hated it, you have a place to join me, possibly, and have even more fun. Like, it's going to be bonkers. Does that sum it up, Tom?
That does indeed sum it up. And all of that is going to happen next Friday night at 8:05 p.m. sharp Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you guys tune in with your buckets of popcorn because, oh, man, we're bringing the yucks.
Bring the buckets. I can't
believe I just used those two words in the same sentence, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And, of course, we've got content coming out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This coming Monday, in order to kick off our March podcast episode, Chris, you have another thing to promote. We've got another interview coming up.
Yeah, guys, we're speaking to not only an actor of one of my favorite, and Joe, I would highly recommend you watch Kim's Convenience. Get that into your slate of bedtime sitcoms if you haven't seen it yet. It's such a charming show. I'm absolutely in love with it. But not only is Sujith Varghese playing Mr. Mehta in Kim's Convenience, he is on the show The Expanse, which is a highly touted sci-fi show. I've started the first few episodes. I'm starting to get it. I didn't get it when I tried watching it a few years ago, but I'm starting to get it. Our Professor Pat, friend of the show, loves that show, and so it's going to be really cool to kind of pick this kind of, actor who's been in the biz for a long time. He's probably got a lot of war stories, and we're going to try and get as many of them out of him as we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
That's awesome.
It's gonna be awesome, guys. That's this coming Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got so much more content for you guys planned. As always, we still put up our audio podcast too. I just wanted to give those a quick shout out as well on Anchor. And you can Anchor distributes them to anywhere that you want to listen to them on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You guys can listen to all of the shows there. We put up all of our weekly podcast episodes, and we're gonna have another podcast coming up soon. I've officially announced it, but I'm gonna start teasing it out. Talkin' Thrones, where I'm gonna be breaking down Game of Thrones episode by episode on a weekly recap series in order to honor it for the 10-year anniversary since the show premiered. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Already 10 years, huh?
10 years since it premiered, April of 2011.
That's insane.
Pretty insane, yeah. And I want to break down why one of the arguably the biggest show of the last decade seemingly up and vanished with that disastrous final season. And we're going to be doing that all. We're going to be breaking that down for the next probably couple years because 73 episodes total. So yeah,
you're in it for a while.
It's a lot to say the least, but I'm up for it. I'm up for a long term overall because I love that show and I've wanted an excuse to revisit it. And this is finally going to be it, along with a lot of other things that we have planned. A summer cruise, summer of Steve. That's all I'm going to say as far as some hints.
Yeah, little hint. I like that hint.
But our guest, Joe of Guy at the Movies, thank you so much, of course, for gracing us with your presence. Again, where can the good people find you? And please promote the big thing that you've got coming up.
You can find me at guidethemovies.com for all of your movie news as well as reviews and other random stuff that pops up there. On Mondays, we have Awards Watch with Math Teacher Movies. On Wednesdays, we have fantastic movie reviews that are video reviews from Jaren Talks. On Thursdays and Sundays, you'll get the box office predictions as well as the recap of the box office from the weekend. Obviously, it's very interesting with a lot of theaters being closed. On Fridays, Darren's Movie Reviews does a fantastic review of WandaVision, and we'll be jumping in again with The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And we do the Guide to Movies podcast with Joe and Sean every Tuesday night, live at 7 p.m., maybe 7:05 now, but 7:05 p.m. on YouTube, as well as anywhere you get your podcast on Wednesday morning. Guide the Movies on Instagram, Guide the Movies one on Twitter. Find me other places. I just do a lot of random shit. So, guys, I really appreciate you having me here. It was a lot of fun to talk about this. You guys are always a blast to, talk through rumors, theories, all that stuff with.
Awesome.
Likewise,
Thank
man.
you. Of course, dude. We love having you on. You're the man. You're Joe the guy of Guy at the Movies. That's why we love having you on.
Should I plug the film festival one more time?
Yes.
I think why not?
March 25th to the 28th, we'll have the Guy at the Movies Virtual Film Festival. It's a free film festival. It's all online. Every movie is available either on VOD or streaming, but we'll also have a lot of great conversations with different filmmakers, as well as live podcast recordings and some educational sessions. So please pop on for that. These guys will be a part of it. I will be interviewing G.O. Parsons, who is the creator and writer of Willy's Wonderland, and following that, these guys will be hosting a wonderful watch party of Willy's Wonderland. Chris, you need to watch it beforehand because it is funny as shit.
I plan on it.
Yeah,
I think I'm making my dad watch it tonight, so I can't wait.
Nice.
But it's a lot of fun, and Gio is he's a young filmmaker. He's a great filmmaker. It's a lot of fun to talk to these guys. So please follow Guys Film Festival on Instagram. Keep up to date on there, and there'll be more information about registration and stuff coming soon.
Hell yeah. And thanks again for having us be a part of that, man. It's
I
always
love
an
being
honor.
a part of it last year. I can't wait to be a part of it again this year. It's gonna
Chris, you didn't tell Dom he's not a part of it?
Oh, sorry, man. That's off air.
Damn it.
Kidding.
I changed my vacation plans for that weekend too.
You actually did. I respect the fuck
Did
out
you
of
really?
that, Dom.
Yes, I did actually. Well, we don't need to get into that now.
What were your vacation plans?
Oh man. So
Chris,
Dom, is there any
people
place?
find you?
Oh, okay. You're too nice. Dom, the people can find me anywhere that matters, all across the internet at Christian Evanko. Evanko spelled Evanko. I've been getting back to music, and I've been going pretty hard working on my album. I have 5 tracks now. Last week I had 3, so it's coming, guys. I mean, it's still going to be a little while. The goal is to record it, produce it, write it all myself for the first time ever. But awesome. I'm very excited to share that with you guys. I'm going to start working on my personal YouTube channel in a few months, and I figured, hey, you know what? I always speak about my music. Let me start telling you guys about it. So at Christian Evanko, you hit the link in my bio. Some of my old songs are already up there, so you can kind of get a taste of what I've done. But I do want to say that this is probably going to be the most mature, and when it's all said and done, the most proud I might be of a release. So keep your eyes peeled. Of course, thank you all so much for hanging out with us, liking this page, subscribing to this channel. It warms my heart. It really does mean the world to me, and thank you for being here. Dom, what about you? Where can the people find you?
Add Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, but that's only where I post sarcastic things, just making fun of the world. You can find all of my efforts being focused in on here, the Talkin TV YouTube channel, where if you guys leave a click on the like button and leave a comment, you guys can let us know some future ideas for some content that we'd like to provide to you, the people. If you click the subscribe button and you click the bell next to it, that way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. You guys can add to our overall subscriber count. Guys, we're almost at 300 subscribers. We're trying to plan a celebration for a certain time period, and you guys have been tremendously helpful. But seriously, click that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's right there. It's glowing bright red. It's kind of hard to miss.
And if you're not sure if that's the Talkin TV page, you will catch every post that starts off with, all right, people. And
exactly.
It's
an easy starter. It's an easy starter. What can I say? It gets you right in the mood overall. And of course, follow us on our Facebook and Instagrams at Talkin TV Podcast overall. And Joe, you know it's funny because I bet you were wondering, you thought you were gonna get out of this episode unscathed. You thought you were gonna make it. You thought you were gonna make it.
Oh,
I had to build up to it because not in the way that he was expecting. Because Chris,
oh, this is so true.
What is our slogan, Chris, that we use to close out the show that you made me say at the end of every episode because you think that it's a catchier title? And go.
Guys, this is the Talkin' TV podcast, and you know what that means. That means that we will be here for 12 seasons and a short film.
Watch more motherfucking movies, people. We out.